Listen to The Brew for the best classic hits of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. KOKL, Okmulgee, Oklahoma.
SJ, welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. Jay, Stongo, Gary Fife, Jaho Jeff Gedos, Mvskoke Radio, Mabu Wedge Giz. Welcome to our program again, our weekly production of Mvskoke Media. We're going to look at a couple of things here today that we probably heard in the news for the first one, and then we're going to get a bit of variety in our second segment. But first of all, we have Dr. Chris Poole from the Department of Health here with the tribe. We're going to revisit the topic of opiates. We have the tribe now joining some other folks filing suit against Big Pharma, the big pharmacy companies who are dealing with sending these drugs out into our communities, and they become available and growing addictions. But we want to revisit the drug itself, what's going on there, and its effect upon the Mvskoke Creek Nation. But first of all, Dr. Poles, thank you so much for coming down. We appreciate you visiting us again.
My pleasure.
Now, I think for those who might have been living under a rock or something like that, let's just describe the phrase opioid. What does it mean? It obviously stems from the word opium. Is that correct?
Right.
And now it's branched off into pill form. And
oh yes, it's been around forever. I mean, it's been around for a long time. A lot of meds we have in general are derived from plants, and this one originally was derived from the poppy plant, where opium is made, and they originally converted it into what we call natural opiates, which are found from the poppy plant, and they've now. Gosh, we've made synthetic opiates, of course. Companies have manufactured just like THC is natural, technically. I mean, but we also have a synthetic version of that as well that's manufactured with companies and so on and so forth. So it's a big deal. There's lots of different versions of this stuff out there.
But it still stems from the plant there.
Originally, yes.
Well, I remember this has absolutely nothing to do with our discussion, but. As a kid, watching these old Hercules movies where the wise man would have his people gather the plant to put everyone to sleep, and that's the first time I ever heard the phrase.
Well, the Wizard of Oz. I mean, when they're going to the Emerald City, I mean, poppies. The witch does the poppies, and that's I think the premise there is that put them to sleep.
Yeah, that's crazy, but
right.
As you say, it's now been morphed, so to speak, into a more disturbing form now. There are a lot of different names that can be listed under the phrase opioid. Maybe you want to visit that just for a second for us.
Oh, well, you have, of course, morphine. You have things like codeine, which is converted to morphine in your body. And then you have things like heroin, which is, I think it's like diamorphine. It's and then fentanyl, which is a kind of a heroin on steroids, almost, is the way I would look at it. Oh my gosh, yes. Like 20 times, 10 times more potent. Sometimes 100 times. I mean, I've heard all sorts of stuff from it. And so a little goes a very long way.
The thought of it is kind of scary. It's like so available that we didn't even think about it. When I was growing up, we always heard of people getting hooked on cough medicine for the
right.
It's the codeine that was in there, and going on to other things, including, as you say, heroin and that sort of stuff. But we hear so much about it in the news these days.
It's very popular in the news, yes.
Yeah, and the government is talking about dumping piles of money into dealing with the crisis.
Yes.
Each state now, it seems like, has its own commission and organization to deal with the problem. Law enforcement is reporting the rise.
Right.
And of course, the medical community has to figure out a way to deal with it. So I guess let's focus there for a second. Now, your department is kind of on the front line as far as dealing with the problem, right?
Yes.
So what is it that you're seeing? Are we seeing? First of all, do you have numbers? And then second, we'll talk about what's happening there.
Well, what we see is, so the difference between, I would say, somebody who's dependent on opiates versus like meth or alcohol is, what we don't seem to be seeing a lot of is people coming in saying, hey, I'm hooked on these pills, can you get me off of them? Mm-hmm. They come in complaining of other problems, pain. That's the common denominator for a lot of the opiates is chronic pain, and they oftentimes just don't come forward and admit, hey, I may be hooked on these things. The problem with these type of medicines is that if you gave me opiates, I would become hooked. I mean, that's just the eventual progression of them if you take them regularly, but unlike some of the other drugs that we see, they just don't come forward. So the numbers, I think, are variable. It just depends on how you ask things, and we're busy gathering that data now. We know it's a problem. It's just isolating the patients as far as locating like who's really addicted and who is at risk of being addicted and so on and so forth. So it's a little harder to pinpoint and kind of pin down, at least from my standpoint.
You mentioned gathering data. Now, are we talking about the walk-ins here at the hospital here in Okmulgee? You're talking about the clinics scattered around through in Creek Country?
Basically all of them. We see, I think the numbers from the emergency room have climbed steadily over time, and it's not that we're having people come in saying, "Hey, I'm addicted to this opiate." What we see is really, "Oh, I hurt my back," or this pain, I can't control it anymore, and so one of the problems with using opiates they're great anesthetics initially, but long term they can actually make the pain worse because you respond differently to that than you would. So they don't work indefinitely, which is why you need, one of the many reasons why you need a higher dose every so often. It has to increase.
So your tolerance
correct
will change. It's kind of being a junkie then, kind of.
Well, it's not that people go into that having that kind of attitude or mentality, but the medicines themselves create the scenario. That's just the natural evolution of it. Much like if I used Valium 3 times a day, eventually, for almost all the people that I've met, that doesn't work as much as it used to, and so you have to. Alcohol is the same way, and so 2 beers doesn't give the same effect that you used to have, and so it takes then 3 beers, 4 beers, 5 beers, 6 beers, and then it becomes its own problem.
Yeah, and throw in a shot of tequila.
Right. And one of the things that now this is national numbers. One of the things we found, and it can kind of vary depending on who you ask, but somewhere between really 70 and I think more towards 80 to 90% of people who are actually dependent on opiates also have another mental health condition that goes either related or unrelated to it, but is also present at the same time: depression, anxiety, PTSD, so on and so forth. Some of that opiates can make. Well, I don't think it makes any of them better, but some of them are kind of more directly related to opiate use, and some a little more indirectly related. Mm-hmm. So opiates are what we call a CNS depressant. It doesn't stimulate people; it kind of slows them down almost. So somebody that's depressed may want to numb themselves, so they might use an opiate. But in the long run, it serves to really kind of backfire. It's kind of like, I'm in the winter. You've seen the old movies. Hey, give me. Can I have some of that whiskey? I'm cold. You feel like you're warming up, but actually you're freezing to death because you're releasing heat, and that's why you feel warm. So you're actually cooling your body down even faster. So it's actually doing the opposite.
Yeah, we've seen that in so many movies.
Sure, right.
When I lived in Alaska, that fantasy still...
It's like the last thing I want to do is drink alcohol in the wintertime, if
yeah.
I'm stranded in the snow.
Yeah, give me a shot of brandy there, and I won't feel as bad, and if I do, I won't care as much.
Right, well, you won't live as long either.
Yeah.
So.
Now, I guess, let me ask you for a scenario here. A common situation where someone who's injured their back or strained it, or kind of like me and many of my friends, that you get older and
Sure. Believe me, it happens.
that lower back pain
Sure.
gets you in the morning, and sometimes it really can just knock you down. I mean, you see, I'm not getting out, forget it, I'm calling in, I'm not
Sure.
going to work. And then you might see a physician or someone, and they will prescribe one of these drugs for you.
Right.
Now, I've seen it happen. I've actually, been there, and first thing I thought is, is this going to cause me problems?
Sure.
And, I'm aware of it and looking at it and, noticing whether I actually, quote, need it, unquote,
Right.
for that pain. Now, is that a common scenario, or is it some people just like, well, I got a pill, hot damn, let's just go ahead and take it?
Yeah, I've seen it both ways. I mean, the interesting thing is that people may think differently if it's prescribed by a provider, a doctor. I mean, they know better, they know everything, which, really isn't true. And so they accept what they're doing is benevolent, and maybe superficially it is. They're trying to do the right thing. But good intentions sometimes can cause bad things to happen. Mm-hmm. And so people just kind of blindly accept, well, the doctor wrote it, so I should take this. So I don't have a problem if somebody questions, do I really need this? Should I be taking this regularly? And I don't think providers have done a good, this is not necessarily our providers, just globally throughout the country, providers haven't done a great job on kind of educating patients on, look, this is really not, this is very temporary. It's not supposed to be used chronically. It's funny, a couple of years ago, my wife had her wisdom teeth out, and she was sent home on, I know, it's not something I'd want to have happen, but she was written a prescription for opiates, and it was a pretty hefty prescription. She didn't use any of them, but then they're sitting around the house, and so now what do you do with them? And that's when the trouble really, it's kind of like the pump is primed. And this is why, for instance, for kids, it's becoming a big problem, because you don't need a drug dealer to get a hold of an opiate. You just have to go and they're around everybody's home, it seems like, and that's kind of gets that ball rolling, which is really a dangerous thing to have happen. So I think educating patients, but then also we have to figure out a way to educate the providers too. That this is just not cool. We really shouldn't go down this road, and there's got to be other ways to treat pain than an opiate.
Right. If taking that same scenario another step, if you take your prescription on a regular basis and you run out, and you think you need to renew it for the same pain, or perhaps imagined pain or something like that, I mean, is that renewal kind of a red flag that you might want to think about?
Well, one of the things that we're doing here within Department of Health is really trying to brainstorm on who should be on opiates really, and for how long, and what really is the standard. And with a lot of things, I think just nationally, primary care is in the front lines, but I don't know if they get really the training that they probably should have gotten in residency that really teaches them, like mental health in kids is a great example. Pediatrics and family practitioners treat 90% of these problems in the country, but they don't get really any formal training. I mean, they get a little elective here and there, a lecture here and there, but then they're thrust into the meat grinder of like trying to take care of all these people that they're having to play catch up. And so in today's let's go, they may not have time to catch up very well. So we're busy kind of putting together protocols and like, how do we want to handle this in our area, and then eventually try and coordinate with other tribes and other communities of how do we all work on the same page on this? What's the best protocol, and what's the best way of treating patients, and what alternatives are there that we can use to treat this problem?
Let's look at our own tribe here now. I mean, the entire Mvskoke Creek Nation now. Are you seeing numbers change and climb or decrease? Describe the problem that your crew is having to deal with right now.
Well, I think historically the numbers have been climbing up until, I should say, maybe until recently. We've really tried to really aggressively start to address this, and I think us and other tribes at the same time, simultaneously. And so there's kind of two ways of looking at this. There's look at it like a bathtub that's filled with water, and there's a faucet that's just pouring water into the tub, which are basically prescriptions and people that are being prescribed these medicines. What we're trying to do is trying to figure out a way to limit, to treat a patient appropriately, but use alternatives to opiates and not just willy-nilly just continue to prescribe these things indefinitely. So I think the prescription numbers that we're seeing, I think, don't quote me, I think are going down. I have to look again. But we can't control outside of our clinics. So somebody can go to somebody in Tulsa and find somebody that doesn't feel that way. And I think that's one of the challenges right now is we can control the amount of water that's coming through the faucet, but we can't control people that go outside the system.
Yeah, and we heard of that occurring so many times.
Sure.
And, someone going, pill hopping.
Right.
Some rather unscrupulous doctors and things, pay to play kind of thing.
Right.
Pay me and you'll get your pill.
I think medical board and what we call the PMP, so the state version, OB&DD, state version of the DEA, are playing catch up, I think, with this, and they're trying to catch up, and it's now required for us to look. So if you come in and you're on a scheduled medicine like an opiate, technically I'm supposed to look you up on this website that says who you're getting it from, what you're getting within the state, and how often, and I'm supposed to check that and document it and so on and so forth. And I used to hate to do that because it takes up time, but I really like it now just because you can learn a lot of, wait a minute, you're getting this medicine, this medicine, and this medicine from 5 different people. That doesn't make sense. Something's wrong here. And so it's been a challenge. I mean, we're kind of learning, at least I am learning as I go, and it's a pretty steep learning curve.
Well, let me ask you what you're finding there. What are you seeing? Are there any changes, any measurable increases that you're aware of, or a decrease in a certain type of medicine? Or
I don't have specifics on that per se, and all the data I have is probably a couple years old. And there's two things that are interesting, and this doesn't really truly directly relate to the opiate problem as a pill form, but just opiates in general, like heroin and fentanyl. One of the things, and this may not be a popular thing to throw out there, but nationally, what we're seeing, I think, is that as states legalize marijuana, for instance, historically a lot of marijuana came from Mexico. And as those are legalized here, those seizures, so the transporting of weed across the border is going down. I think the seizures from the DEA has gone down the last couple of years. And as that's been happening, the seizures of heroin and fentanyl and meth, really, those are the three big ones from Mexico, are shooting way up. So we're seeing a shift in the kind of things that are being imported into the country and into the state, I think. And yesterday we heard, I guess, the Dallas version of the DEA, I guess, is seeing a lot of increase in fentanyl and heroin now. And so it's just a matter of time till it makes it up to Oklahoma.
The border states are getting
right,
hit
they're
first.
getting hit first. And so the government, we were at, the Secretary of Health and myself were at a meeting in Durant and met with Senator Elizabeth Warren. And this is a bipartisan thing, I think, that's happening, which is always good. The feds, I think, are trying to, at least Congress is trying to push through a pretty big bill. I think they were saying like $100 billion that would specifically target treating the opiate crisis at various kind of levels. And my understanding, I think I heard her say 10% of that would be kind of dog-eared for tribal governments, which is good. I think it should be higher than that personally, but which is still a fair amount of money.
It's a significant step. Also.
Yes, and so it will take money to attack the problem and contain it. I mean, no question about it.
Let me ask you a bit about the effects of these drugs. Are there signs people should be aware of when the drug begins to affect them? Obviously, you shouldn't be out driving and that kind of thing, but what happens when someone takes one of these pills?
Well, I think initially you feel euphoric and it kind of deadens pain and may, it was not for euphoria, but deadening pain, numbing pain was what it was created for. It's always a bad sign if somebody took too much and they have trouble breathing, of course. But long term, these medicines, like many other medicines that are prescribed, they don't give the same result if you take it regularly. And so what people end up doing is they double up on it, or they take it instead of every 8 hours, every 6 hours, and then every 4 hours. So they're creating a scenario that's going to end up of them being basically dependent on it. And so then at that point it's hard to quit, because when you stop, you've heard the term kicking the habit. Mm-hmm. Well, that came from heroin and opiates, right. Basically. Your body doesn't like doesn't like it when you just stop that if you're using it long term. Mm-hmm. And so on the one end, if you use it regularly, you get constipated, you can be lethargic, it lead to depression, sedation, and so on and so forth. But then when you abruptly stop, if you're taking enough long enough, then massive diarrhea, you don't feel well, you feel like you have the flu, you feel like you're dying. You're not going to die, but it sure feels like that. You're sweating and like you'd see in the movies.
Sure, we've seen so many of those.
Sure,
Somebody's trying to kick it.
Right.
And
yeah, you get these what you call myoclonic jerks. Your legs just twitch and kick, and that's just your body reacting to not having it.
So it's a situation where your body, the physical reactions, sort of take over your thinking processes and say, I got to have more of this.
Sure. I mean, it's basically, it's like it's throwing a fit. Your body's throwing a fit because it's like, where is it? I need it. Mm-hmm. And it's always a bad sign.
Yeah.
With any drug, actually.
Yeah. Including alcohol and caffeine.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, if I don't have my coffee, I'll go into withdrawal the next night. And it's not fun.
Headache in about
right.
an hour or so.
So, and different types of opiates are probably, I mean, they're all potentially dangerous, but heroin's a classic one that's really, it can get to the brain easier than some of the other ones, and so it's really, it really hits you, and it's really a big high. But with that also comes a lot of pain when you stop it, and so it's very reinforcing.
That's because of the intravenous injection.
Yeah, well, it's what we call lipophilic. So it likes. There's what we call a blood-brain barrier, which is prevents things from entering into your CNS, central nervous system, and so that the way it's made, or the way it looks chemically, it's almost like it has a key to the door. It just walks right through, which opposed to other medicines can't get through, and so they don't affect the brain like that would want it.
Now the next question is a bit morbid, I guess. Has the Mvskoke Creek Nation reported overdoses of opioids? Oh, I think
everybody's seen them. I think nationally 100 and something, maybe 200 people die a day of opiate overdoses. One of the stats I saw.
No, that's nationally.
That's
not
nationally.
Not tribally.
I don't know if I have that off the top of my head, but trying to figure out from the medical examiner who's native and who isn't is has been a problem as well. Sure. Because I don't know that they actually report that.
Oh gosh, maybe we'll check with Lighthorse and see what they've got.
Right.
The way to kick it, is that something that Department of Health offers, like alternative programs and support and whatever else?
Yes. So one of the rate limiting steps with all this is funding. Can you ever have enough money? But since there is funding for this through behavioral health, and at that point, so somebody needs to contact behavioral health, and there's a procedure for that, of how to be hooked up with the system, and depending on the level of dependence, then we just kind of decide okay, what does this person need in order to get off this drug and remain sober, basically. So yes, and we're in the process of developing a whole new kind of restructuring of how do we want to approach this really in primary care, because I think that's where you're going to see a lot of it. It's not people coming in historically saying, hey, I need to get off my heroin. It's or my prescription pill. It's in primary care saying, hey, I have pain and I'm taking all of these, and I took them early and I've been out for 2 weeks and I need more.
Ooh, yes.
That's typically what you might see.
Junkie. Yeah.
Well, it's just,
that's a street term.
People don't want to have pain, and so they take it. And the government, I think, historically, feds have, in the 90s, said pain is a vital sign, and so you shouldn't have pain when you leave the hospital. So people react to that, and so they don't want people to the hospitals don't want to get in trouble with the government, so they are, let's get rid of pain, let's give them opiates.
Yeah. So when I say junkie, I'm thinking people who do it for fun, so to speak. But that's a different...
I think most people end up doing it because they want to avoid the pain of not taking it. It becomes its own monster at that point, and so you just do it to avoid going to withdrawal, which is pretty bad. It seems pretty rough for people.
In the last few minutes here of our discussion, I know you mentioned it once, but if someone's kind of wondering whether or not they have this addiction and need to do something about it, what might be the warning signs?
Well, using more than you're supposed to is probably a classic one.
Heck of a start.
Another warning sign, I think, is if you're taking enough to where you're having trouble breathing, or people find you passed out. Certainly, it's just like alcohol. It's like, this is not a road that you want to be going down. Of course, there's the obvious warning sign if you end up in the emergency room because you stop breathing, and they have to give you a medicine called Narcan, which can reverse that, at least temporarily. That's clearly a warning sign, because it should not be happening. And I just think using more than what you're supposed to, and really, these medicines historically, well, this is my opinion, there should be a short-term medication. Long-term, it's just so filled with problems that anything more than a couple weeks, then you really need to hopefully get with your provider and say, is there any alternative to this kind of medicine? Because I really don't want to be hooked. Right,
yeah. Now, I know this is not your end of the business here, but the tribe has joined others, including the Cherokee Nation, in the suit against big pharma companies. And at that point, I get a little lost in some of the legalese and kind of wondering, well, what's this for? What do they wish to do? Has any of that discussion come down to your level? Have you kind of or any personal thoughts, perhaps?
I really don't. I'm so concerned with just how do we clinically deal with this problem. I haven't even paid much attention to that end of it, and I'm the last person you want to discuss anything legal because I don't know anything about it, other than I try not to deal with attorneys whenever possible.
Right. Yeah, me too. It's not a good sign.
Right. So I'd probably have to kind of turn you back to either Department of Health or the AG's office to even talk, because I'm really not well versed in it.
That's actually who we were supposed to be talking
really?
To. But and
here I am.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing and what you're sharing. We'll get around to the other guys, so we get a bit persistent if we need to be. Now, if someone was looking for help for themselves medically, or some sort of support group, are there the resources out there that you would point them to? Well,
there's the Behavioral Health Department is certainly a reasonable resource to call. And, of course, I can never remember the outpatient number, of course, off the top of my head, but the the hospital number is an easy thing to call, and they can maybe direct. I think there's a decision tree where you can call into behavioral health, and actually, I think the number is 758-1910. That's the general number for behavioral health, I think. Okay. So that's probably where I would look first. If you have a CDIB card or native of any, it doesn't matter what tribe, as long as you live within the district. I mean, that's really what matters. Outside of that, there's Cree Oaks probably has some resources. From a psychiatric or mental health standpoint, we're kind of almost like the 50th state. We're not very progressive. So I think we're playing catch up on the amount of resources that can be used to devote to the problem. Which hopefully will be fixed if the bill passes. Should be fixed a lot. Yeah,
there is some bright spot there that we can look to. Okay, Dr. Pulse, thank you so much for coming in and taking care of business for us. You got some very important information that we've shared, and we're going to keep after this one. And don't be surprised if you get called back in from us.
Sure.
Say, come on, man, let's put you on the spot again.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, well, you have a wonderful afternoon. Good luck. Keep us posted on anything.
Will do.
And if there's something you need to get out, let us know, and we'll be right there.
Appreciate it.
All right, have a good one.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Chris Pools from our Department of Health there, talking to us about the opioid situation here. And we will keep after our AG and PR department to get us someone to talk about that opioid suit. That's so important and incredible task. But we'll be back with a second portion of our program after we have shared a couple of, as they say, important messages.
Hear that? That's the sound of hope being killed by meth. Methamphetamine use is causing huge problems in our community. Hear that? That's the sound of something you can do about it. Events like rodeo, res ball, and family time can help keep kids away from meth.
Talk to your kids. Keep our culture alive. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Learn more at ncai.org.
I started doing it when I was 11. I wanted to be just like my big brother. And some of my friends were already doing it. We got hooked fast. I just can't get enough. I'm Jacob, and I'm addicted to playing the drums.
There's lots of stuff that makes it cool to be native. Doing meth isn't one of them. Find something better to do. Check out ncai.org. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians. Who am I? Am I Indian? Just 'cause I'm a girl from the res, don't make things up about me. What if I move away? Then who am I? Some kids try meth just to escape, but then I think about my grandma, my little brother, my beadwork, my poetry, and I think, I like who I am, and I know meth is not for me.
Check out ncai.org, a message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Get ready to make memories. 4 days of free family fun comes to Okmulgee at the 44th Annual Mvskoke Creek Nation Festival, June 21st through 24th, featuring the Kids Carnival, traditional Mvskoke dances, arts and crafts, and food, softball, golf, horseshoes, and volleyball tournaments, and the All-Indian Rodeo that started it all. Live entertainment hits the stage on Friday and Saturday nights. All events are free and open to the public. It's the Mvskoke Creek Nation Festival, June 21st through the 24th in Okmulgee.
I started doing it when I was 11. I wanted to be just like my big brother. And some of my friends were already doing it. We got hooked fast. I just can't get enough. I'm Jacob, and I'm addicted to playing the drums.
There's lots of stuff that makes it cool to be Native. Doing meth isn't one of them. Find something better to do. Check out ncai.org. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Who am I? Am I Native? I don't want people assuming things because I'm Indian. I just want to be me. But how do I live in two worlds? Some guys just check out by doing meth. But that ain't for me. Because I see my family, my friends, my drum making, my future. There are a lot of cool things about being who I am. And meth isn't one of them.
Learn more at ncai.org. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Okay, we're back here on Mvskoke Radio on the Brew here in beautiful, cloudy downtown Okmulgee. We have on the line now Rihanna Yazzie, who's talking about opening with a brand new musical about Native American women. So, Rihanna, are you there with us?
Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, thanks. After a little fumble finger here on our board, we finally got you on the air here. Now, I was flitting through, was it Facebook the other day, and saw this flyer for Native Woman, the musical, and I found this was kind of intriguing, and I did remember there was a, like, Native Man, the musical at one point, wasn't there?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Okay, well, this is kind of a change of pace for us. Now, I understand this musical celebrates Indian women and things like that, so why don't you tell us about what you've got?
Yeah, so up here in the Twin Cities, New Native Theater is a company I started 9 years ago, and we've been producing plays by and for Native artists, community, and audiences. And we produce brand new plays. We do some new play development in sort of conventional theater way. We also do these kinds of plays like Native Woman the Musical, which are community-created stories. And so in Native Woman the Musical, we have 9 different women who are telling a story with a musical twist, and it's not like you're kind of like Rodgers and Hammerstein kind of a play. It's each individual woman is reflecting on how music is played a part of their life, and so they're telling specific stories about that.
So we're not going to see a big corps of dancers
but
tapping across the stage.
Oh, yeah, no, but we're not saying that won't happen. We actually have, there's a story by one of our artists named Tammy Skinaway, and she has always lived in South Minneapolis, and so she is writing this ode to sort of Little Earth United Community, United Tribes Community, which is really large, concentrated housing development where Native folks live up here in the Twin Cities. And there's a park next to it called East Phillips Park, but it's affectionately called Cockroach Park. And so she remembers in 1984 when all these Native people were breakdancing at Cockroach Park. So that's what she's writing about. And so we partnered with the House of Dance Twin Cities, which is a hip hop breakdancing organization. So we've got a whole choreographed breakdance that's happening during that play.
Oh, I hope you put it on film. I'd love to see that. Now, I actually used to live not more than a few blocks away from Little Earth, and I remember it.
You know Cockroach Park.
Oh, yeah, I know it. I don't remember that name, but the description fits. I mean.
Yeah. So were you breakdancing in 1984? Oh,
no, I was a little old. My bones weren't ready for that, but I noticed, all the kids were into that, and, we'd get AIOIC is where our office used to be. And,
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and,
just down the street.
And we would get all these kids coming through there who were, with their boom boxes and large chunks of cardboard where they would throw it down and go into their routines, which is okay with me. Yeah, it was interesting. A lot of stuff they saw out of Flashdance and things like that.
Yeah, and there was a movie called Break-In.
Right.
And yeah, but I mean, it's the cool thing about Native people telling their own stories is we get to hear stuff like this because, like in the general population, if you think of like breakdancing, you definitely aren't associating Native people with breakdancing, and yet there's all these young people, all these Native people who are like breakdancing and doing these awesome moves and building their lives around a performative art. So it's that's why I love doing what I'm doing, and why I love working with Native artists and helping them to find their own meaningful career paths into the performing arts. Because, as a Native person, we're just not encouraged to be in the performing arts. We're just not. And so as a result of that, you find really few Native artists who have years of training in the arts who can make an impact in the way that non-Native people often are sort of seemingly naturally invited to be a part of that as a career. So Native Woman is this community-created play. It's like yet another way for Native folks with like a hidden heart for performing or writing to come on stage and try out what they've always wanted to do.
The idea of a musical, I think, is unique. It's not something we hear from. That's one of those art forms that we, quote unquote, weren't part of. We were all usually stereotyped into, of course, the flute players, which is fine, and then folk singer kind of artists, and artistic forms on canvas and with oils and things that kind of tended to fall into the same categories. But this is a real break, no pun intended, from what we were, I guess, supposed to be doing, the kinds of things that people recognized us. Now, I understand it's more than just a women coming out and singing and talking, right?
Yeah. It's a multimedia piece, so we also have little snippets of interviews of different Native women talking about various stories in their lives, or even just sort of taking on that stereotype and demystifying what those stereotypes are about Native women. So, I mean, I'm really excited about, because when you live in a Native community, you know all of these amazing, vibrant people, and so being able to put a show together, you can kind of bring them together. So one of the interviews is Brenda Child, who is really like the foremost scholar in bringing attention to boarding schools and issues that were happening with that. And we also have, like locally here in the Twin in Minnesota, we've had this sort of like surgence of Native women getting into politics. And so there's a Native woman who lives in Little Earth who's running for a state representative. And so she tells this really beautiful story about what her connection is to her family and how they stayed together through some really difficult times. And you can just really see like why she has such a strong character and why she's gone into politics. Her name's Margarita Ortega. So it's just like really, I think I'm super lucky because as the director and the producer of this project, I get to talk to all of these amazing people, which is always the fun thing about putting a show together.
Now, I understand it will be on stage beginning May 9th and running through the 13th there in St. Paul, right?
Yeah, that's right. We are Wednesday through Sunday. Sunday's Mother's Day, so it's kind of a good weekend for Native Woman the Musical.
Mm-hmm.
And it is playing at Park Square Theater in the Andy Boss stage, which is the Black Box Theater, and that is happening in downtown St. Paul.
Now, I want to get back to perhaps the genesis of some of this. Now, in recent years, we've seen a real growth in the strength and power of Native women expressing themselves and taking positions of leadership in our communities and outside our communities, and becoming such a wonderful, strong, inspiring presence. And they're bringing out some stories that are honestly quite tragic in too many cases. Now, is that where you guys got the idea? I mean, is this kind of growing out of some of that movement?
Well, I would definitely say we don't shy away from that. There's some really tough stories that a couple of the folks are telling. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily because of that movement. I guess I would always have to say that in my life, I've always felt like Native women were always extremely vocal, and it was sort of the outside community that wasn't being responsive and wasn't listening, and so yeah, we are taking advantage of this moment to get those stories more visibility, but the sort of funny reason or sort of non-political reason that we ended up producing this play is kind of because back in 2012, we produced an original musical that we created called 2012 the Musical, and at the time, most of our ensemble was made up of Native women, and so the story was kind of telling a few funny stories through, and it didn't have like the best depiction of some Native men in there because there was some heartbreaks, and it was coming through the lens of this comedy and Native women talking about like Native men who did them wrong. And so the guys in the cast are like, hey, how come, when are we going to have a play that focuses on us? So then I was like, sure, let's do play just with you guys. And so we did Native Man, the musical, in 2014. And it was an amazing, unexpected success. And really it was exactly like this, Native men telling their story in their own words. And we had some amazing guys participate, including the late Dennis Banks, who told a story through video about his very first kiss. It was just the most unexpected thing that you would expect.
You
right?
Don't expect Dennis Banks and a kiss in the same sentence.
Well, you might not know Dennis Banks.
Actually I do, but you might not say it out loud.
Oh, but I was really, really fortunate that when I approached him, he said, yeah, come on up. I'd love to talk with you. And so I got to spend the weekend with him and his family up in at the Sisseton Powwow back in 2014. And so I talking about this play and this project, and I said, well, what would you like to talk about? And he said, you know what, I have a story. And then he talked about being in boarding school, and when he was 10 years old, this little girl approached him on the swings and gave him a kiss, and he passed out because he was so shocked by it.
Oh my!
So it was just a wonderful opportunity to not only hear that story, but I also had an opportunity to hear and record some stories about his experience at Wounded Knee and his experience about the trial that followed Wounded Knee. So I'll always treasure that experience of becoming friends with Dennis Banks through this play. And so fast forward 4 years, now we are doing the other half, Native Woman the Musical.
Do you ever expect maybe to put the two together and go out on a tour or something, or at least maybe one of them on tour or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, this iteration of Native Woman, we're open to anybody inquiring about bringing us down for a tour. And I'm also really interested in a possibility of like a nationwide storytelling of creating Native Woman the musical, utilizing the voices of Native women throughout the country. And, you know, I always have these grand visions for my theater company, and we've just now started really getting established. And so this is our 9th year, and this is only our 3rd year with our nonprofit status, so that's really been able to like bump us up into another category of being able to do more fundraising for the projects that we're doing, and also make collaborations with larger theater companies. So that is definitely in our plans.
Now, there actually have been other Native groups who have done that sort of thing. Was it American Indian Dance Theater, I believe, and maybe that have actually kind of broken the ice on that kind of thing. Now, from your experience and working with the other musical and perhaps some idea of what this one can do, what's been the reaction of our non-Native neighbors? Do they get it, or are they supportive? I imagine there would naturally be a group that would be, but I mean, are they behind you? Do they come and attend?
Yeah, every single play we've ever produced has been sold out, and it's hard to do that with just Native audiences. And one of the things that we really discovered is that when we decided we're going to produce plays that Native people see themselves in, and we reflect that experience back in most authentic way that we can, then it gets so specific that really anybody who comes and sees the show can relate to it. Because, you know, one of the things, like we always get these comments, like in the early days of New Native Theater, we'd get these surveys back from non-Native people, and they would say, "Oh, as a white person, I was really surprised that you guys didn't even talk about me." That we didn't say, "Oh, you know, the white man is guilty of X, Y, and Z," you know, and also, you know, we would get these comments like, "Wow, I felt like I had the honor of just being in somebody's home and getting to know a person, you know, through characters who are just who we would recognize as Native people and who we wouldn't censor and who we wouldn't change our behavior around each other." And in that way, I really feel like that I think is the strongest education for non-Native people, to emphasize and understand Native people and the issues that we're going through, and also just the things that we can celebrate. Because one of my biggest things with the company is like knowing that we have this lens towards serving Native people audiences and artists. We're not down in the dumps. We're always, inevitably, everything sort of has this sort of like comedy laced through it. Because the thing for me is, as a Native audience member, I want to go and see a Native play, and I want to come out feeling like better than I started.
Right.
And you can do that with the play.
We've seen enough of the tragic kind of thing and how bad off we are and that sort of thing. We already know that. Let's go have a good time, huh?
Exactly. And then when we can talk about those tragic things, we're putting those things into context, you know, and we're experiencing those things in a way that isn't like extrapolated in this like sort of like, you know, this new term poverty porn, in which like non-Native folks come into reservation communities, find the most downtrodden stories, and then display those and say, "Oh, this is the experience of all Native people." And we know that that's not the experience of all Native people. Yes, we all have, I mean, I would be surprised if something of that has never touched any of us individually, but that's not all we are. Not at all.
No, not at all. That's the sitting duck story, I used to call it. They come in and find the alcoholics and drug users,
Right.
and people are crying about how bad they were treated 300 years ago. I said, well, yeah, it's there, but that's not all of us. And at one point, I kind of envisioned doing a cartoon with all of these TV satellite trucks lined up outside the gates of Pine Ridge saying, okay, hurry up, it's my turn next. We got to do our part. But
Yeah.
it's my warped sense of humor, I guess. But anyway. Now, the play is opening real quick, I understand. So if anybody's going to be up in St. Paul, they have a chance to check it out. And if anyone would have any questions about what's going on there and how they might participate or even get you on tour, how would they get a hold of you?
They can send us an email, and it is info, I-N-F-O, at newnativetheater.org. And then we spell theater with R-E at the end instead of E-R, because, I don't know, we're just like that.
It's kind of cool. Yeah.
And you could also just do a Google search. Our website is newnativetheater.org. We also have a Facebook page, and I think it's pretty easy to find us. Do contact us, and our phone number is on our website, and I'll give that out just in case anyone wants to call. It's 612-367-7639. And but usually email is a really good way to get a hold of us, especially when we're in production mode.
Sure, which you are now, kind of busy there, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, we're running May 9th to the 13th for Native Woman the Musical up in the Twin Cities, and then I'll mention that since we do have this lens for making sure we get Native community into the theater, our tickets are always pay what you can, like pay what you want at the door. And then if you want to get tickets ahead of time, we're always happy to have you pay full price online.
I mean, yeah, it isn't cheap to do this, right?
Yeah, and
Okay, well,
and if anybody has a group, we can accommodate ticket sales for groups. So,
all right. Well, wonderful.
Yeah.
Rihanna Yazzie, thank you so much. We're going to have to cut it off here and get on with it, but let us know how you're doing, and if you got anything else up your sleeve, give me a call, and we'll try and work on it.
Fantastic, we will.
All right.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Gary,
Thank
for your
you.
time. All right, take care.
Okay, Mido. All right, now we have some community announcements coming up. And also, we'd like to share this.
Get ready to make memories. 4 days of free family fun comes to Okmulgee at the 44th Annual Mvskoke Creek Nation Festival, June 21st through 24th, featuring the Kids Carnival, traditional Mvskoke dances, arts and crafts, and food, softball, golf, horseshoes, and volleyball tournaments, and the All-Indian Rodeo that started it all. Live entertainment hits the stage on Friday and Saturday nights. All events are free and open to the public. It's the Mvskoke Creek Nation Festival, June 21st through the 24th in Okmulgee.
Okay, now, if you have a graduate coming up, getting out of school real quick, the June 1st edition of the Mvskoke News, always publishes its annual graduate profile section. And if you want to be included, you need to get us a digital photo and email information by no later than Friday, May 11th by 5 p.m. Now, that's coming up pretty quick, so you might not want to wait on Indian time on that one. And sorry to say, any late profiles will not be accepted, and we've had to break a couple of hearts saying, no, we can't help you. All right, bike trails, 10 to 11:30, April 27th and May 11th. Come bring your kids to come play at the Dome. Play with some of our bikes, balls, and other fun stuff that's coming up for the public. Preschool children ages 5 and under must be accompanied by adults. And that's at the Mvskoke Dome again on April 27th and May 11th. Where are we here? College Work Experience, an intern program for college juniors, seniors, and graduates to gain professional experience. you might want to give them a call. Information at the Employment and Training Office, 918-732-7773. Okay, I think that's pretty much all we can do it this week. Oh, Youth Award, Mvskoke Youth Awards coming up. Deadline is May 18th for young people, 12 to 24, who've done outstanding things in the community. Okay, well, that does it for us. We want to say thank you for listening. We appreciate it, and we'll be back next week. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Madot.